Well, good morning and welcome to the May 29th meeting of the State Board of Higher Education. Thank you for everybody for dialing in. It's wonderful to see your faces versus just using conference calls. We took lots of precautionary measures here at Bismarck State College. We wore our masks and we got our temperatures checked. And I think it's just a real proof that we can be flexible and find solutions to ensuring we have effective board meetings as we govern higher education. And so with that, I'm going to open the meeting. And Christy, if you would call the roll. When it comes to individual institutions, I would just ask whoever the leadership is from that institution to state that you are here. We don't need everybody from every institution to announce that they're here. We just want to make sure that each institution is represented. So Christy, if you would call the roll.
Board Chair Hacker.
Here.
Dr. Ryan.
Here.
Ms. Nesset.
Here.
Ms. I.
She will be arriving about 10 this morning. She had a prior commitment, so she'll be here in Tioga shortly.
Thank you. Mr. Morton.
Here at NDSU.
Mr. DeShock.
Here.
Mr. Mahalik.
Here.
Ms. Louders.
Good morning here.
Ms. Mattern. Here. Dr. Dragseth.
Here.
BSC.
Larry Stolten's
DSC.
here. Thank you.
Hi, Larry.
CBC here.
DS. Lake Region.
Doug Darling here.
Mayville.
Good morning, Brian Van Horn here.
Minot.
Good morning, Christy. This is Steve Shirley.
BCB.
Good morning, Jerry Migler here.
NDSCS.
Good morning, everyone. This is John Richmond.
NDSU.
Good morning, Dean Bershana here. Thank you.
UND.
Good morning, Josh Wynn and Andy Armacost here.
Valley City.
Good morning, Al LaFave here.
Williston.
Good morning, John Miller here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Christy. And we'll welcome Danita when she's able to join us at around 10 o'clock. She did let us know that she'd be a little late. And Kathy, thanks for opening your doors to having Danita join you there at your building, your office. I also want to welcome our new student member who is attending with us today. And I just want to acknowledge Erica Solberg will be joining the board on July 1st after Caleb finishes his work on the board. Erica is a political science major at North Dakota State University, and she's entering her senior year. She's sitting over here in the corner. Welcome, Erica. Glad to have you, and thanks for starting to get engaged with the business of the board before your term starts. With that, the first item on our agenda is the agenda. Are there any changes or additions that need to be made?
Chair Hacker, this is Member Loud.
Oh, go ahead.
Chair Hacker, this is Member Louders. I would request that perhaps during my Student Academic Affairs report, I provide an update for the board on the most recent WICHE meeting, which was held, of course, online in May, if that's a good fit.
That's a great fit, and we look forward to the WICHE and MEC updates when we can get them, so thank you.
Great, thank you.
Chair Hacker, this is Casey. I would move approval of the agenda as presented and with Member Lauder's request.
Second, Don Morton.
Great, thank you. There's a motion and a second. Christy, if you'd call the roll.
Mr. Morton.
Yes.
Mr. DeShock.
Yes.
Ms. Nesset.
Yes.
Mr. Mahalik.
Yes.
Dr. Ryan.
Yes.
Ms. Louders,
Yes.
Board Chair Hacker,
Yes. Thank you. That motion passes. Before us next is the consent agenda. And as a reminder, any board member, non-voting and voting, as well as institution leadership or interested parties, if you would like us to take items off of the consent agenda to have a fuller discussion, all consent agenda items go through the committee structure and process as a reminder. So they have had in-depth review at the committee level. I just want to mention there's some really good things happening in here. There's new flexibility and adapting to a more streamlined tuition model at Dickinson State University. I think it's wonderful. So just because it's on consent doesn't mean it's not very important business of the board. So I'll just, is there a request for anything to be moved off of the consent agenda and moved to regular business?
Chair Hacker, could I make one other comment about that? To echo the chair's point, if you remember about a year and a half ago, the board worked very quickly in a course of about 2 weeks to respond to South Dakota's tuition change because the southeast of the state, was trying to adapt. And these are other examples that the board told campuses if you need to adjust tuition models to be more responsive. So this is work that you'd started about a year and a half ago that's quietly being done. So it is important, as you said.
Thank you, Chancellor. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
Chair Hacker, Member Mahalik here. I'd make a motion to approve the consent agenda items 2 through 12, I'm sorry.
Chair Hacker, this is Casey. I would second that motion.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Christy, if you would call the roll.
Mr. Mahalik,
Yes.
Ms. Nesset,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Dr. Ryan,
Yes.
Ms. Louders,
Yes.
Mr. Deshak,
Yes.
Board Chair Hacker,
Yes. Thank you. That brings us to item number 13, the State Board of Higher Education Committee structure. Chair Morton of the Governance Committee had made some discussion at the last meeting, and that Governance Committee acted last couple weeks ago. And Eric, I'll let you introduce what the proposed changes to our committee structure are.
Thank you, Chair Hacker. This is Eric Olson, General Counsel to the board and the university system. As background, thank you, Chair Hacker. The Governance Committee requested that the system office and myself prepare some options for realigning committees to improve the efficiency of the board, as well as to reduce the burden on the board members. And the proposal before you was the one that was approved by the Governance Committee at this month's meeting. And the function of this, or the end result of this proposal for committee realignment would be the elimination of the Governance Committee as a standing committee and the move of its functions to a number of other, to the other committees. As you see, if you look at the proposal, there would be the Research Committee would be renamed the, excuse me, the Governance and Research Committee, and would absorb certain of the Governance Committee's duties, mostly focused on evaluation and metrics, along with the evaluation of the board's effectiveness. And then the IT functions of the Governance Committee would be moved to the Budget Finance Committee, which is a good fit because the Budget Finance Committee already supervises the sort of the financial aspects of information technology in the system. And then the final item, which is SBHE self-assessments, would move to the Audit Committee. And so the proposal would require a number of policy changes. Those are attached to the agenda item, and the reasons in favor and the reasons against are sort of laid out in that document. I'd be happy to answer any questions but from board members or others at this time.
Thank you, Eric. Are there any questions for Eric? Any discussion?
Chair
Chair
Hacker?
Hacker, this, oh, okay.
That's okay, Casey, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Chair Hacker. This is Casey. I was just going to state that when we developed the research committee, or when it was formed, there was discussion that other additional duties could be put over to this committee with time. So I have reviewed it, and I have no problems as chair of the research committee to take on the additional duties.
Thank you, Casey. Kathy?
Chair Hacker, I just want to double check with you. So it's budget and finance would move to audit. Would audit remain as a standing committee?
Yes, audit remains as a standing committee. One area of responsibility that would be increased on audit is, Eric, specifically that bullet point.
That's the board's self-assessment process. And I spoke with Chris Pesky, who advises the audit committee, and he was not concerned with that change, because any sort of audit of that self-assessment process, the audit committee would be conflicted anyway, because its members would be taking part in the process.
So the board has always had a self-assessment, usually led by the system office, and the system office generally leads 90% of the work for the self-assessment. And so it would really be the review of that process for the audit committee, which I think adds integrity to the self-assessment process too.
Thank you.
Any other
Chair
feedback,
Hacker, this
comments,
is
or
Casey.
questions?
Chair Hacker, this is Casey. I would move approval of item 13, State Board Higher Education Committee structure as presented by legal counsel Olson.
Thank you, Member Ryan.
Member
Chair Hacker,
Vice
Member
Chair Ryan.
Louders.
I apologize for interrupting.
Member Louders, I'll second that motion.
Vice Chair Ryan, I just wanted to clarify that the motion encompasses the approval of the proposal for committee of realignment, including the deletion of policy 302.5 and the amendments to policy 302.3, 302.2, and 302.7, which are attached to that item. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
Great, thank you. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Christy, would you call the roll?
Ms. Louders,
Yes.
Ms. Nesset,
Yes.
Mr. Mahalik,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Dr. Ryan,
Yes.
Mr. DeShock,
Yes.
Board Chair Hacker.
Yes. Thank you. That'll bring us to item number 14, extension of waivers. I'm going to turn this over to the Chancellor and Tammy Dolan, I believe. What did you want on this, Tammy?
Chair Hacker, this is Lisa
Oh,
Johnson.
Lisa.
I'll be
Yeah.
present.
Hey,
I
Lisa.
can present item.
Great.
Yes. Good morning. I can present item 14, and I will just briefly cover A through D in my summary for the board's review. Essentially, policy 830.1, the student pavement policy, paragraph 1 and paragraph 5, as well as policy 406.1, academic calendars, permit institutions the ability to extend the last day to drop a course or withdraw from the institution through August 31st of 2020, essentially extending that additional institutional flexibility through the end of the summer term. And honestly, most, if not all, institutions took advantage of this previous accommodation that the board granted in the spring semester. So those two are related. Policy 402.1 and 402.2, Section 3, A and B, actually refers to admission requirements for individuals applying at the associate and baccalaureate level programs. The extended waiver would then permit institutions to admit U.S. and international students into undergraduate programs with unofficial high school and unofficial college transcripts. Currently through the spring semester, or would be extended, through the spring semester of 2021. This additionally implies acceptance of unofficial transcripts from transfer students and graduates at the graduate level too would be permissible. So those are related. That really concludes the overview of the four subsections to item 4, and present those for the board's approval today.
Thank you, Lisa. Board members, any questions?
Chair Hacker, Dean Bershani, may I ask a question?
You bet.
Lisa, I just want to make sure that I'm tracking this right as far as the deadline. Obviously, ACTs are a problem right now, and what we're hearing from high schools is that may continue into next year. Would the policy as drafted extend through the application period up to fall of 2021, or does it stop in spring?
Chair Hacker and President Bishani, as proposed today, the request was just extended through spring semester 2021, with the understanding that we'd come back. And I know that we have a number of other waivers we're probably going to have to look at in terms of flexibility and refunding, et cetera, if necessary. But with the provision that we could come back and extend that into summer or fall of 2021 as well, yes. As written, it concludes, that the waiver concludes at spring 2021.
Would there, just as a friendly amendment, if you will, would there be some way of communicating that to high school counselors so that they're very anxious about that and whether they're going to have the capacity to offer the ACT? Is there some way of communicating that it will be extended if needed?
Yes, definitely, we could do that. That's a very good suggestion.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Great point, President Bashani. Thank you.
Chair Hacker, this is Casey. I would move approval of item 14, extension of waivers, which includes
Member Ryan, there's a
policies.
motion.
Chair
Member
Hacker,
Ryan,
I
is that your
second Casey's motion.
Okay, so there's a motion to approve all of 14 in a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Christie, if you'd call the roll.
Dr. Ryan,
Yes.
Ms. Nesset,
Yes.
Mr. DeShock,
Yes.
Ms. Louders,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mr. Mahalik,
Yes.
Board Chair Hacker.
Yes. Thank you. That brings us to item number 15. Lisa, this is the informational parts of 14. Do you want to continue?
Yes, Chair Hacker and members of the board, these are informational. They do not actually require board action, but they are related procedures that implement the policies and related waivers that you just approved. We are required as a courtesy to notify the board of these waivers that are granted during the pandemic. So just as a courtesy, procedure 830.2 regarding refunds is related to the waivers that I described previously under item 14. Procedure 402.3, the guidelines related to home educated students, provides those same assurances in terms of the ability to submit unofficial transcripts and the waiver of the ACT requirement for admission purposes, again granting that to students who are home educated. Procedure 402.9, admission procedures for new applicants with international coursework, has a provision that the Chancellor can authorize additional tests of English proficiency, in which the request has been granted to authorize the Duolingo test of English proficiency because of the fact that it can be administered remotely and in a secure, proctored manner. That concludes the overview of the informational related procedures as required to be reported to the board.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Lisa on the procedures?
I just have one question. In looking at the refunds, it seems that is student focused in that policy, and we had some questions from the staff perspective regarding refunds of certain fees, particularly for parking permits that were required, and it seems that there was no mechanism for refunds of those to be allowed for staff who are no longer able to work on campus. So I'm just wondering if that includes the ability to refund.
Is your mic on?
I moved it up.
Green?
It's green. Blue.
All right, I'll try this one. Sorry about
Better.
that. We had some staff questions regarding the refund portion of it. It seems that that was student focused for allowing a refunds of those fees, and there were some questions from staff about the ability of institutions to grant refunds for fees that they have paid, particularly in parking fees, when staff are no longer able to return to campus. So we were wondering if this policy would cover that ability for refunds, or if there's another one that needs to be included or possibly looked at for a waiving.
Chair Hacker,
Lisa,
this
did
is
you understand the question?
Chair Hacker, this is Tammy. This is Tammy Dolan. We did not specifically talk about that with the fiscal officers when we met to talk about this waiver. So it's something I could definitely take back to them and see. Waivers are determined at the institutional level. And so I know there'll be variations, but we'd gladly take that back and talk about it as a group.
Thank you.
Thank you. That will bring us to item number 16. Lisa, do you want to, I'm just really excited about these items. I can't express it enough. This is such in the benefit of students, and I appreciate all of the work that's went into these. This is second reading, so we went over this last board meeting. This is really to the benefit of students, and so I'm really excited about the work that's went into this, Lisa. Thank you so much for working with the Student Association and so on, and Caleb and the other folks. So why don't you take it away, 16A and B.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Chair Hacker and members of the board, and thank you for your support and actually your enthusiasm for these, and at least an acknowledgement. This was a lot of work with the Student Association. I've detailed both of these in quite a bit of detail at the first reading. So today, really just bringing them to your attention today as a second reading. The Policy 503.2, the Student Data Privacy and Security Bill of Rights, really outlines the students' rights to the related collection, use, and controlled access to their personally identifiable information. And this is so timely and so pertinent at this time, and it's nice to kind of be in the home stretch on this one. There are some aspects of this policy that will necessitate the establishment of some implementation deadlines in consultation with the Vice Chancellor of Information Technology. So I present this, both of these separately today, and present Policy 503.2 titled Student Digital Privacy and Security Bill of Rights, and seek the board's approval on the second reading today with the implementation deadline to be set by the Chancellor in consultation with the Vice Chancellor of Information Technology.
Thank you, Lisa. Any questions?
Chair Hacker, while they're thinking, if I could just comment to echo the chairs. If people recall, this has been about a 2.5-year effort and ancient history. Remember Jared Melville, North Dakota, if not overshadowed by this COVID thing, probably would have had, well, we did have press interest. It was at least in the running to be one of the first in the nation. And as Vice Chancellor Johnson said, this has become incredibly timely. As you can see in the news, Wall Street Journal articles on student tracking, data, and whatnot. So again, I want to commend the students who saw this several years ago as part of the Envision process, and the governance committee, which also had responsibility for governance in cyberspace, so to speak. So this is a culmination of several years of good work.
Thank you, Chancellor.
Chair
Board
Hacker,
members.
this is Casey. I would move approval of policy, second reading policy 503.2 with recommendations as suggested by Lisa Johnson.
Second, Member DeShock.
Security Bill of Rights took a long time. The student political rights policy probably took twice as long to develop, but a lot of thought has been put into that, and I'm very pleased with the outcome. This too is for a second read before the board. It is a new policy because we ultimately separated student political rights from that were originally sort of contained in policy 308.3. That was really more applicable to state employees, the use of campus facilities, and freedom of expression. The new proposed policy before you today really has a strong emphasis on permissible student activities in a very positive way, and electioneering in particular is very pertinent and relevant that this is in sort of the home stretch of approval as we enter election season. And I present policy 503.3 titled Student Political Rights and seek the board's approval on second reading today.
Thank you, Lisa. Board members, any questions?
Chair Hacker, Member Louders, motion to approve the second reading of policy 503.3, student political rights.
Thank you, Member Louders.
Second, Morton.
Thank you, Member Morton. There's a motion and a second for item 16B. Christie, if you'd call the roll.
Mr. Mahalik?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Mr. DeShock?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Board Chair Hacker?
Yes. Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 17, another section that I'm excited about, and especially with the timing due to the pandemic. Ms. Grindy?
Good morning, Chair Hacker and members of the board. Today I'm presenting 4-HR leave policies on second read. All policy changes are directly related to updates to policy HR 2, which is the Family Medical Leave Act. And those two policy updates consist of running all paid leave concurrent with FMLA and a consistent system-wide approach for a leave measurement period. Now, to address staff concerns regarding preserving their leave to use when they return from an FMLA, updates have been made to 3 additional leave policies. That's HR 6 annual leave, HR 7 sick leave, and HR 21 leave without pay. So basically, the recommended changes and the updates to those 3 policies allow employees to preserve up to 40 hours of sick leave and up to 40 hours of annual leave to use after they return from FMLA. These proposed changes were vetted through the regular council and cabinet feedback, and overall feedback was very positive. If passed today, please note that the August 1 effective date needs to be for the measurement period, part of the policy change. That's as per federal law. We must provide a 60-day notice when we make any changes to the FMLA measurement period. So I would ask for approval of second read today, and I'd also be happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Grindy.
Is this, let's see, is it working this time? I hope so. Thank you. This is Retha. I would just like to say that if I were able to move to support this, I would. I am so thankful for all of those who have put in so much time and effort at the system, on the various councils, for taking the staff input and for coming up with what I think is just a really great solution that addresses all of the concerns that were had and is addresses those concerns that we had as staff. So thank you very much. I just wanted to really express my appreciation for that.
Thank you, Ms. Mattern. I would just add that you were a critical component of us sending this back to the HR Council when we were at our meeting a year ago. So thank you.
Chair Hacker, Member Mahalik here. I would make a motion to approve the second reading of the amended HR policies A, B, C, and D under item 17.
Thank you, Member Mahalik. There's a motion. Second. Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Christy, if you call the roll.
Ms. Louders,
Yes.
Mr. DeShock,
Yes.
Ms. Nesset,
Yes.
Mr. Morton,
Yes.
Mr. Mahalik,
Yes.
Dr. Ryan,
Yes.
Board Chair Hacker,
Yes. Thank you. That brings us to item number 18. I'm going to turn it over to Eric just to explain the policy, how we annually elect our chair and vice chair.
Thank you, Chair Hacker. Every year at the May meeting, so let me take a step back. The officers of the board, the chair and the vice chair, are annually elected for one-year terms. Each of those terms may be renewed one time for consecutive terms. And so in effect, the way that the way this has been handled is that at the May meeting, the nominations are solicited for those two leadership positions, and then it's at different times there's been a vote at that same meeting. Other times it's been held over till the next meeting, but that discretion remains in terms of how to handle that remains with the board, whether to move immediately or to delay action on that. But functionally, this is the annual process to ensure that there is strong leadership that has been approved by the board. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the way that this policy applies. This is policy 310.2.
Thank you, Eric. So just so I understand the process, we should do a call for nominations, and then that'll be an open kind of discussion, and there could be multiple nominations, and then we will cease nominations. Can we then have some conversation as a board whether or not we want to cast the vote at this meeting at that point? Is that procedurally okay? And I apologize for not asking this ahead of the meeting.
Yes. So, yes, Chair Hacker. The way that the process would work is that there would be a call for nominations, and then and then there can be discussion over who may or may not be nominated for these positions, and then nominations would be closed, and then there would be discussion over whether to proceed to a vote, and then there would be a motion, and then there would be an election if that's chosen. Otherwise, that would be put off till the next meeting. So there's nothing set out in the policy that says specifically that there needs to be, for example, a 1-month waiting period or something like that. Yep. And to clarify, these would be done one at a time. So the chair followed by the vice chair.
Okay, thank you. So I think we like to do these things in person sometimes, but we'll kind of go slow. And so we'll start with item 18A. This would be a call for nominations for the chair position.
This is Nesset.
Go ahead,
I would like
Nesset.
to nominate Mr. Nick Hacker for chair of the State Board of Higher Education.
Morton, second.
Thank you. We'll continue nominations. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Are we sure there's no other nominations?
Chair Hacker, I make a motion to close.
Close.
Request for nominations. Yeah, there you go. Dawn and I at the same
Okay.
time both asked to close, so.
So there's been a motion to cease nominations. I want to open it. We'll probably come back to that motion in just a second. There's some formality to those motions, but is there any, let's just have a conversation briefly. Is there any concern about casting the vote today versus at our June meeting, which will also be Ivan style? With some more in person, by the way, but.
This is Don Morton. Chair Hacker, I think in the past we have I think it's important we vote today because the chair can start getting ready for some things. And in the past we have, once we had a nominee like yourself, we voted on that nominee, then we would move to the vice chair.
Okay. Yeah, there is some work that needs to be done before that next meeting, including assignment of committees, et cetera. And we have new board, we'll have new board members coming. So with that, we'll entertain a motion at this point.
Chair Hacker, this is Casey. I would move that Chair Hacker be reappointed as chair of the State Board of Higher Education.
I will
This is
second
Nesset,
that.
I will second.
And let's have a vote.
Okay, there's a motion and a second, and I'll be brief. It's been a real honor to serve as your chair, in particular during these challenging times. It's not been easy, but we have to think back sometimes, maybe 6 months ago, of the many really great things we're doing. We did a lot of great work on some policies here just a couple minutes ago, and so it's been an honor, and I got the fire in the belly to do it for one more year, and so I appreciate the vote of confidence. And I also just want to mention, through the pandemic, the team has really been important for me. Not being medically trained, it's been greatly appreciated to have Dr. Ryan, Dr. Wynn, Dr. Carson, and the Chancellor, and Phil Wisecup. So this isn't something, a lot of this work is done as a team, so I thank them all. With that, Christy will call the roll.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Mr. Mahalik?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Mr. DeShock?
Yes.
Board Chair Hacker? Do you?
Sure. I don't think we're allowed to abstain. Yes, that's fine. That will bring us to item number 18B, nominations for vice chair. We will open nominations.
Don Morton, I'd like to nominate Casey Ryan with one stipulation, that when he jogs, he always had his grandson with him. And for the benefit of the newer members, that was ended up being a life-saving event a year ago, a couple years, or 18 months ago. I nominate Casey Ryan for vice chair.
Thank you,
This
Member
is
Morton.
Nesset, I second.
Thank you. There's been a nomination for Dr. Casey Ryan to serve another year as vice chair. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to cease nominations and cast a unanimous ballot for Dr. Casey Ryan as vice chair.
Chair Hacker, Member Mahalik does so. Let's cast that, what you just said. Sorry.
This allows us to take it in one step.
There you go.
Is there a second?
Second, Member DeShock.
Thank you, Member DeShock. Christy, if you would call the roll.
Mr. DeShock?
Yes.
Mr. Mahalik?
Yes.
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset,
Yes.
Dr. Ryan,
Yes.
Ms. Louders,
Yes.
Board Chair Hacker.
Yes. Thank you, Board. That moves us to into the board reports and discussion. We may have some items of business laying in here, in particular the resolution that Mr. Olson started with. Item 19 is the COVID-19 pandemic update, and for the board's awareness, this is likely to continue to stay on our agenda for some period of time. And first, I want to congratulate Interim President, Dean of the Medical School, Dr. Josh Wynn, and now Chief State Health Strategist. Congratulations, Dr. Wynn. Thank you for your service and for supporting the state of North Dakota in this trying time. And of course, there's a team around you, and there's been teams all along the way. And really look forward to you stepping up and helping the state of North Dakota reorganize its health department and strategy as we work our way through this pandemic. So if you did not see the news or press release, pull up the email from Billy Joe. And congratulations, Dr. Wynn, and thank you sincerely for all of your work.
Thank you, Chair Hacker.
You bet. With that, I'll turn it over for an additional update from Chancellor Hager.
And once again, echoing the chair's comments, I want to thank Dr. Wynn for being just a voluntary spirit. People didn't realize he was an Army veteran, Korean veteran, so it's like he's on now the front line of truly an attack on the people of North Dakota. But also wanted to thank and recognize two other people. Dr. DiLorenzo is retiring today. And I know, Josh, with all the time we took for the responses starting about February, that he had to carry a heavy load. So I just wanted to acknowledge several years, I think almost 8 years of service to the state of North Dakota in two difficult times, a pandemic and a budget crisis. And then also, I believe by Monday, we will have the new president at UND. So over the weekend, no fanfare. We're gonna honor Dr. Wynn at the board meeting in June, hopefully. But also Armacost will be passed the baton here in the next couple days. Again, we talked about this at every board meeting. I just want to commend the cabinet, remarkable responsiveness beginning in early March. And the students, were just incredible. I mean, to think build on the military analogy, just good soldiers packing up, leaving, and other campuses across the country literally had riots. Police had to be called in. And so just to commend the students and then the faculty and staff who converted thousands of courses almost overnight online, and the staff who continued to go into the campuses. People didn't realize this during the very uncertain time of how fatal this disease was, how contagious. We had hundreds of students still on campus because they couldn't get home, and the staff kept showing up. Again, a frontline type of function. So it's been an incredible performance, and we are now getting into the next phase, which is the restart of this. And I just wanted to say before I turn it over to Josh Wynn that North Dakota again was leading. The board made a statement of support, and Chair Hacker will get to the actual resolution here in a minute. But you made a statement of support to the campuses to prepare and plan to restart a month ago at a somewhat uncertain time. But I've been on several conference calls, WICHE, MEC, Arizona State hosted one, President Crow, it's President Daniels of Purdue, University of Washington. There are huge universities now shifting their position, especially in Seattle, to that they will return a substantial percentage of their students back on campus. So you were deliberate, you were thoughtful in how you approached this, and now we sense a shift. Probably barring New York and some other major cities won't, but I think we're very well positioned. And again, I want to thank Dr. Wynn, which I'll turn it over to in a minute, but also Eric Plummer of UND Police Force, who is the rep for the research campuses, and Dr. Shirley and Dr. Darling, who volunteered. Not only is Dr. Darling, if you remember a year ago, was top 20 ranked community college in the nation by the Chronicle. He's also responding to oil workforce disruptions with some programs, and he volunteered to be on this. So for all those presidents, thank you, and my own staff. But to Dr. Wynn, go ahead, over to you for some remarks about your task force.
Well, thanks very much, Chancellor Haggerott, Chair Hacker, members, guests. So a little while ago, the Chancellor asked me to head up this task force that we've called the NDUS Smart Restart Task Force. This is rapidly evolving. We had a first planning meeting last Friday, and we're going to get down to work soon. What I'd like to do briefly is to go over the objectives as we've discussed for the task force, then a little bit of our structure to carry out those goals, and then a few closing comments comparing the state position that the Chancellor and Chair Hacker mentioned along with or compared with the task force. So the three major goals that we have for the task force, I think I'd categorize as follows, especially following our meeting last Friday. The first is to catalog the various policies and procedures that the constituent organizations within NDUS have for dealing with COVID-19 and particularly for the return to campus issue. So we look to have a central library of or catalog of all of the appropriate policies and procedures related to that reaction, so that it will be a reference point for each institution as an institution wants to check what other institutions are doing so as to inform their own policies and procedures. The second is, and this, well, we'll go over this in the structure of the committee, is to allow similar institutions to explore common areas of interest so that they can learn from each other. And there will be differences. So the two larger campuses in the eastern part of the state, for example, will have a common issue, and I'm just picking it at random, but of sports events where they potentially will be a lot of people inside a stadium that wouldn't necessarily apply in Williston, for example. So the structure of the task force will allow institutions of similar size and scope to have a venue where they can discuss items of mutual interest. And then the third big challenge for the task force is to look at some issues that are not necessarily unit specific, but may be generalizable, where there may be financial economies of scale and scope of having the various institutions work together. I'll give you an example, and this relates to the other role with the state, but that would be testing. So depending upon what we as a task force might determine that there might be purchasing and other advantages, if there were some common thoughts about testing, for example, that might be beneficial if we did it as a system rather than as individual units. That doesn't mean it would be obligatory, but there might be an attractiveness of something like that. So to carry out those three major functions, the way we're structured is the overall task force, but the task force is composed of three what we've called working groups, one representing the two large campuses, and the co-chairs of that are Mike Moore from NDSU and Eric Plummer at UND. The medium-sized campuses that would be chaired by Steve Shirley, and then the small campuses chaired by Doug Darling. On each of the working groups, we will have not only the chair, but there will be a faculty representative, a student representative, and then a staff expert in the COVID response of those size institutions. Those working groups will then be part of this larger task force. Other members of the task force will be Dr. Paul Carson, who you probably know, who's a professor at North Dakota State University and an infectious disease expert, as well as other representation from NDUS, including Carol Redmond, Eric Olson, Phil Weiskopf, and Jerry Rostad. Our special advisor is Vice Chair Ryan, and administrative support will be provided through the system office. So we are in the process, or let me start that sentence again. The working group chairs are in the process, if they haven't already, they will be soon, of constituting their working groups. And we will get out a schedule of meetings and so forth very soon. Quite frankly, I'm a little behind since the last meeting because of the strategy role. I've had a lot of discussions with the governor and other members of the executive branch. So quite frankly, I got a little behind, but I will be coordinating with the working group chairs very soon so that we can get this task force fully up and running. I'll just close before entertaining any questions to say that I feel that this state strategy officer for health is complementary to this role on the task force. The state role is obviously very broad and is at a strategic level. The task force is much more at an operational level. But again, the important component of it is that it is more as a resource. We don't propose promulgating policy for the system or something like that. It's much more to be an asset to each institution by providing this library of policies, providing a forum for discussion as necessary, and then discussing issues where there might be financial advantages, among others, for us working together. And I use testing as an example of that. So I see both the strategy and the task force as complementary, not trying to do the same thing at all. And I look forward to the opportunity to serve and hopefully contribute in both of those areas. So at that point, I think I'll stop and entertain any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wynn. Are there any questions? Board members.
Chair Hacker, this is Casey. President Wynn, I assume that you will have monthly updates to the board meetings and, if indicated, sending out information as you progress through the summer months?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board or interested parties?
Chair Hacker, this is Retha. Dr. Wynn, I just have a question. You mentioned a faculty representative, a student representative, and then a staff expert on COVID response. Can you just clarify the role of the staff, if it will be to represent staff or to just provide, or what it's going to provide? Thank you.
Well, I think that to some role it will be quote unquote representative, but I think the idea is to have content experts who can really help inform this. Again, I will emphasize that the role of the task force is not to promulgate policy. So having an advocacy role, if you will, is really not something that is critical on this. What is critical is to have the perspective, insight, and so forth to contribute to discussions that will be forthcoming. But again, the task force is not envisioned as setting policy.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Nguyen? Dr. Nguyen, I do have one question, and I don't know if it will be necessary, but will the task forces be thinking through engagement with local health system providers when the time is right, to make sure that we're on the same page with those local providers or hospital systems with what our plans are in place, and making sure that they understand what each institution or region is doing?
Yeah, Chair Hacker, members and guests, I think that's a good point. It's an assumption. I would assume that each of the institution's policies and procedures in their due diligence have made sure that that has occurred. I know we do that very diligently at UND, and it's my assumption that the others have, but I think that that is a good point, and we could remind the chairs of the working groups that that is an important component of it. We obviously wouldn't want to be crosswise or not in sync with the local entities. I think it's a good reminder, and we'll put that on the checklist, but I am quite confident that what we will see will be in concert with that. But it's a good reminder for us to make sure of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Nguyen? Again, Dr. Nguyen, thank you so much for your leadership in this effort. And there's no action item here for 19A. We're going to talk about 19B, which is a result of our last board meeting, and set some of this framework for this good work to begin to happen. And so we'll move to 19B, and I'm going to ask Eric to introduce this. It's a resolution to firm up what our action was at the last meeting. We had very positive action at the last meeting. This is not absolutely necessary, but it does encapsulate the feedback, the discussion that occurred based on the minutes, I believe. Right, Eric?
Thank you, Chair Hacker. As Chair Hacker mentioned at the last meeting, there was a lengthy and a very productive discussion about how to proceed with the reopening process and ensuring that students could return to campus in the fall to the extent practicable at the campuses, in the campus's estimation. And through that discussion, a motion was made and that was revised several times. And well, I think it's clear to everyone what the intent and sort of thrust of that motion was. It's always good to make sure that there's clear board action. And so working with Chair Hacker, the Chancellor, and then with feedback from the presidents after it was sort of put together, the attached resolution sort of encapsulates that discussion and sort of lays out the board's background of the sort of push and support for reopening the campuses to in-person education for fall 2020 and to the extent possible in the campus's estimation, summer 2020 as well, and then lays out a few considerations that the board would sort of request that the institutions take into account, but retains the flexibility that the institutions will need to be able to implement this major challenge.
Great. Do you want to speak to the, I believe the cabinet reviewed this as well, Chancellor?
Yes, Chair Hacker. Again, as I was encouraged by the head of ND United, over communication is good. So some would say, well, we already addressed this, in the last meeting, but as things have evolved, we have, further direction from just watching what's happening out there. And so this is very helpful, a further statement of support to the campuses. And this language was all distributed to the presidents, and they had some feedback. So no, I appreciate the board providing this leadership, and thank you.
Chair
Board
Hacker,
members,
this is Casey.
Go ahead, Casey.
Yes, I would move approval of the resolution of support as written by legal counsel Olson. I appreciate what he's done. This does encompass what we, the motion that was made by me and I believe was seconded by Member Louders at our last meeting.
Thank you, Member Ryan. I want to take just a brief moment because when we cast a vote, if we cast a vote here in a couple minutes, we're going to hear a new voice on the line. And so I want to welcome Ms. Danita Bai, our new board member from Stanley. She's joining Member Nesset there in Tioga. Welcome, and we're glad to have you. We'll continue with business as we have a pending motion on the table for the moment.
Thank you.
Chair Hacker, this is Member Louders. I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Member Louders. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Chair Hacker, this is Dr. Dragstaff in Dickinson. We just want to, from the Council College faculty, thank the board for putting in items 3 and 4 in particular, and I did get some confirmation from Ken Hellevad, who's the chairman of the Council College faculty, and we feel really positive about particularly points 3 and 4, so thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dragstaff. That is a lot of that was a result of you guys being engaged, so thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Christy, would you call the roll?
Mr. Morton?
Yes.
Dr. Ryan?
Yes.
Ms. Louders?
Yes.
Mr. DeShock?
Yes.
Mr. Mahalik?
Yes.
Ms. Nesset?
Yes.
Ms. Bai?
Yes.
Board Chair Hacker?
Yes. Thank you very much, Board. This is good work. We'll keep going down in board reports and move on to item number 20, the strategic plan update. So even though we're in the middle of responding to a pandemic and getting the trains back on time and on track, it's important that we don't lose sight of our strategic plan and the opportunities some of the pandemic actually present. Chancellor Hagerott, do you and Phil have an update?
Yes, Chair Hacker, and you stole my thunder. That's exactly the point. We've made the analogy before that we rebuild a plane, through continuous assessment and feedback while we're still flying it. The young people turn 18. People do job changes every year, where some industries can stop and retool. The old days, at least automobile companies would stop and retool their factories. So that's what we're doing, also the strategic plan, and I'll turn it over to Phil. But we still believe a huge percentage of what we do is still going to be the same. And he's got both some really good work on the strategic plan, but also an addendum for COVID, because we know that there could be 10 to 20% of things that need more emphasis, changes and whatnot. Over to you, Vice Chancellor Weisskopf, if you want to fill in a few details.
Thanks very much, Chancellor, Chair Hacker, members. We do have a pretty robust strategic planning process, and this is for the board and the university system. Okay, each of the institutions have their own strategic plans. Okay, which then kind of line up with what the board and the system office works through over time. And so in the end, we wanted to give you all the draft of this, what we're calling a strategic review, okay, which is what's required by board policy to be done every so often, and this is the result of this work. So I'll just summarize, okay, and I will ask the board for comments on this document between now and the middle of the month, so that then we can provide it again for essentially second reading here, okay, when we come back in June. So I want to give you just 3 or 4 main points, okay? We visited all the campuses and talked with the leadership, students, staff, and faculty, and we did that before the COVID business hit, so we were finished in February. And we're recommending no changes to the vision or the 5 goals of the current strategic plan while the pandemic is still in progress. But we do include a discussion of other potential revisions or upgrades that you might want to consider later on. There is a call to action, and that is for the board to increase attention and advocate for resources for mental health, behavioral health as a top priority. This is brought to the attention of the strategic planning team, myself, Billy Joe, and Loris and Chris Erickson at all 11 campuses. And I don't have to tell you that it has come to national attention during the pandemic. Other issues brought to the attention of the strategic planning team by campuses, including the need for more instructional design, okay, and that is to help with online and remote teaching. And remember, this was before the decades of events occurred in the few weeks in March, April, and May. Finally, we have included a preliminary draft survey, and that's what you'll see in one of the addendums there. We actually did an electronic survey with the help of our institutional research people, okay? And of responses. And then finally, the COVID-19 addendum to offer initial thoughts about how we adapt to things that have happened in the last couple of months. So we would ask for comments from the board, okay, sometime by the middle of June, so we can have time to prepare a final draft. And that's all I have to present. We'll take any questions.
Phil, thank you. Chancellor?
Yeah, while people are thinking of any questions, and again, we appreciate the written feedback. I've been on numerous calls, as I mentioned just recently, with Arizona State and Purdue. And one thing COVID has validated across the country is higher ed is on the front line of the healthcare worker crisis, nurses, lab techs, doctors. Higher ed is on the front line of massive unemployment, retraining disruptions. It's on the front line of just teaching the next generation to learn how to learn in this changing environment. And so that's what the COVID addendum, I can tell you right now, and we did a brainstorming session with the 11 presidents, that it's validating across the board that we are not a cost or a burden to the state. We are an asset. To include, we had the sites for 8 field hospitals set up. It was state property. This building was going to be a field hospital, and instead Mary took it because they had a bigger building, but NDSU is a field hospital. So I just would want to make that point that the COVID addendum will be more specifics, but it will clearly be confirming this as an asset for the state in ways we hadn't even anticipated before this crisis.
Yep. Great point, Chancellor. Thank you.
And for the recovery.
Good point. Phil, is there any questions at this point for Phil on the strategic plan update and the survey? Hearing none, thank you, Phil. Great work. And Chancellor, great work. Thank you very much. That's going to bring us down to item number 21. And as we move to turn the mics on over at Kathy, Member Nessett's office there, we have our new board member, Ms. Danita Bai. And Danita, we'd like to take a moment and welcome you to the board. I look forward to working with you. We had a wonderful call. Why don't you just introduce yourself to the rest of the board and some of the university presidents here today.
Sounds good. I'm glad to be here. Danita Bai. I currently live in Stanley, and I apologize for being late. I was doing a virtual keynote at an economic summit in India. So the world is changing, and all that we're doing virtually now. So I'm glad to be here. Nick has appointed me to serve on the Finance Committee. I got to get my committee names right. I'm still in learning mode, and Academic Affairs. So I'm excited to dig in. And this is an incredible opportunity for higher ed overall. So thank you.
Great, welcome. And we'll keep the mic on, and welcome again, Danita, and move over to Member Nesset for an audit committee update.
Chair Hacker, thank you very much. And Danita, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll look forward to having you serve on the board with us.
Yes.
For our audit committee, thank you, Chair Hacker. We did meet on May 20th, 2020. Members Don Morton and Tim Mahalik were present at that virtual audit committee meeting. We went through our reports from the state auditors, operational audit reports for North Dakota Forest Service, Mayville State University, and Dakota College of Science. We accepted the reports and the responses from the campuses. We had a update from the Chancellor, and the Chancellor was quick to thank the work and recognize the work done by Ms. Carol Redman, our compliance officer, who has been working very hard and diligently on the COVID-19 task force for the university system. We also were working with our new interim audit leaders, Ms. Krista Lambrecht and Ms. Dina Cashman. So we want to thank them for their hard work as well. And that is my full report. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Member Nesset. That'll bring us to item number 22, Academic and Student Affairs, Member Leiters, and feel free to go right into a witchy update while you're at it.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Hacker and members of the board. Academic and Student Affairs Committee met on May 19th. Again, I'd like to welcome Danita Bai to that committee. Several items were discussed and acted on, which the full board has acted on today, which I'd like to thank you for. Again, under the consent agenda, Embry-Riddle and Park University were approved to do business in the state, serving students on the Minot and the Grand Forks Air Force bases, as well as approval of Bismarck State College's new program, Automation Management. It was really exciting to hear from Dr. Scogan an update on that new program. The next step of that approval process is to approach the Higher Learning Commission for authorization. And again, that's a great example of being responsive to industry and constituent needs, and to fold into the automation management program leadership skill development. So we're excited about that. Again, the board today approved just moments ago policies 503.2, 503.3, the student data privacy and student political rights policies. We thank you for your approval. We're looking forward this fall to a fall retreat focused on student behavioral health and a continued discussion on distance learning. As has been mentioned, the university system transitioned over 11,000 courses to online this spring. Congratulations, and certainly an expression of thanks to the students and the faculty. Some of the questions we'll be dialoguing going forward in terms of academic and student affairs. How do we take the best of this online experience and move that learning forward in a new global online market? And how do we continue to provide professional development for faculty and staff in this new world? How do we continue to remain competitive, retain these new skills, and meet our current and emerging customer expectations? I would like to express thank you at this time to member Caleb Deshock, whose contribution on this community has been invaluable, and wish him well as he pursues new ventures. So that is my report from the Academic and Student Affairs Committee. At your suggestion, Chair Hacker, I'll move right into a report on the WICHE meeting, which took place again May 18th. Just a brief update on who this is and what our function is and how our affiliation with this unit serves the students of North Dakota. WICHE is the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. There are 3 representatives from North Dakota serving on this board, myself, Chancellor Hagerott, Senator Ray Holmberg, who is also the past chair. The purpose of this committee is to support innovation, cooperation, to resource share, and to create sound public policy. And the commission is composed of membership from 15 Western states and U.S. Pacific territories. Some practical examples of how our membership in this consortium serves the students in the community of North Dakota. Just some statistics. Last year, 554 North Dakota residents saved $3.4 million as a part of the Western Undergraduate Exchange, the Western Regional Graduate Program, and the Professional Student Exchange Program. These WICHE programs provide significant student savings on non-resident tuition in over 170 Western U.S. public colleges and universities and select private healthcare programs. In addition, the Western Undergraduate Exchange and the Western Regional Graduate Program, again facilitated through WICHE, incentivized 1,980 students this past year to invest their tuition dollars in North Dakota. And finally, through the Professional Student Exchange Program, students from North Dakota can enroll in participating programs in another state while receiving substantial tuition support. Currently, North Dakota supports students in dentistry, optometry, and veterinary medicine. So I hope, board members, you can clearly see the benefit, financial benefit and service as well in terms of being a member of this organization. This group does meet semi-annually. As I mentioned, the 18th was a virtual meeting. I think we're hoping to be convening in the month of November in Colorado. I serve on the Programs and Services Committee, and our focus at the meeting was to approve the 2021 work plan, which is tasked to support the COVID-19 crisis response for WICHE. We also review and support online course exchange, leadership academy and development, student exchange programs, all designed to provide high quality and cost-effective education. The committee of the whole approved the budget, which was our primary function at that meeting, response initiatives to COVID-19, and the work plans related to each unit governed by WICHE. So I think a very productive meeting. It was quite challenging, I think, on the administrative end to coordinate a meeting which consisted of membership across multiple time zones using multiple technological tools, but very well managed and, again, very productive meetings. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Member Loiters. And I appreciate the update and the great work that WICHE is doing too, as well as your committee. Any questions?
Thank you.
Hearing none. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to move on and get an update from Member Ryan on the Research Committee. After that update, we'll take a brief break.
Thank you, Chair Acker.
Member Ryan.
We had a Research Committee meeting on May 13th, but I want to take us back to May 11th. We had a meeting of a subcommittee of the Research Committee, and this was a group of 4 members from our committee. We have, and we met with 4 members from Valley Prosperity Partnership to work on the document that we're putting together that will ultimately be reviewed by the State Higher Ed Board. So we had a good meeting, a lot of things that we want to do in common to improve research and hopefully look at a possibility that maybe extensive research with UND and NDSU working together to become the third leg of support and prosperity in the state of North Dakota, along with agriculture and energy. So that's the ultimate goal. So we had a very good meeting. We're working on some special topics within the documents that we're bringing together from Valley Prosperity Group and from our research committee. So this committee, subcommittee met, brought information back to the committee. Again, we'll work on it. We're going to be discussing it at our June meeting and expect to have the final document to this to the Higher Ed Board meeting the end of June. Other things that were discussed were human capital, which is very important, and how do we protect the researchers that we have, especially at NDSU and at UND, so that we're not losing people and their grants to other universities around the country. And this is being worked on by the Vice Presidents for Research, Dr. Shu and Dr. Mihilich at NDSU and UND respectively. We also had a very good news. We had a report from Dr. Kelly Rausch, who is at NDSU, in that state of North Dakota has been awarded another 5-year grant totaling $20 million to support some research that we will be doing over the next 5 years. The approval has been given for this grant, but we will need to get approval from the legislature, I believe, for an additional $4 million to get the $20 million support from NSF, National Science Foundation. The only other discussion was some updating of the North Dakota Science and Technology Plan, which was presented by Chancellor Hagerott and Dr. Kelly Rouse. So overall, a good meeting, moving ahead, and we'll bring things back to you at the next meeting. So I
Thank you,
entertain any
Member.
questions.
Thank you, Member Ryan, and congratulations, NDSU, on the research grant.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ryan, for leading this up. And again, you exceeded the goals we'd set last summer when this committee was started. We had meetings last summer. Also, I just want to commend Dr. Ryan. I know Don Morton said he has to run with his grandson, but Dr. Ryan has been on the front line of this epidemic. He's been going to the hospital. He even did some investigative work that actually uncovered a hot spot up in the Grand Forks area through his just questioning patients. So I want to thank you for also your fearless frontline performance as a doctor. But I want to assure the board on one thing, because a question had come up on the shift of the governance function. The research committee has on its bylaws, so to speak, the ability to invite expert advisors from the research industry in North Dakota to be on working members on the committee. And there was some concern that why would they sit through governance issues? And so we can organize those meetings such that they convene the research and governance committee, do the research agenda, take a break, and then release researchers and whatnot who don't need to be talking about governance, and then convene on the governance agenda. So we are mindful that there are busy people trying to help us on the research enterprise that don't need to be doing governance issues. So that was one question that had come from board members. So in case other people had the same question, that we have ways to structure that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor.
Chair Hacker, Casey again. The other board members who have been on the committee are members Morton and member Nesset. So we greatly appreciate their involvement with the committee.
Thank you. I'm showing that we're just about 1.5 hours in. We were going to take about a 10-minute break. So feel free to put your mic on mute, and we will reconvene at 10:37, according to my clock. Precision. Thank you. Okay, welcome back from our short break. I show it is 10:37, and so we will reconvene and move on to item number 24 on your agenda. Do we need to do a mic check, or are you okay with everything, Christy? Good? Okay. Okay, we'll move into item number 24, update on the State Board of Higher Ed Governance Committee. Member Morton.
Thank you, Chair Hacker. Congratulations. I think this is the first time in my 8 years that you got everybody to reconvene back on time. Good job. We had a robust discussion at our governance meeting, and I'm doing a lot of web researches and putting things together, and I'll get a more detailed mailing out to the board members over the next 10 days, so sometime. But the thing that we have to realize as governance members is, in the past 20 years, the diversity of backgrounds leading to a presidency has really increased due to the narrowing pipeline of individuals willing to take the demands and volatility of a presidential role. And right now, 40% of the presidents at land-grant universities have not come through the traditional tenure track position that the faculty goes through. And that the tenure track faculty position to department chair to provost to president has been the path prior to the past 20 years. And so as we look at tenure, and tenure, let's not get bogged down in nomenclature. Right now, tenure has it's definitely a very academic process that the faculty controls, as it should be. But in the market, now we could call it something different. We could call it a guaranteed something. We could call it something different, but the market uses the word tenure. And there are AAU schools, American Association of University Schools, prestigious schools that are giving tenure to presidents that have not come through the faculty tenure process. And what we're talking about, when we talk about presidential tenure, it's offered as a part of the overall compensation package by a governing board to attract and retain talented people. We've got this very talented faculty, and we want to make sure it's our responsibility as governance board members to make sure this very talented faculty has talented, innovative leadership. And the one thing that will help the pipeline to attract the high-quality people is something that schools are offering, and that's tenure to the president, which means that if for some reason the president job doesn't work out, in this day and age, there's times where it just doesn't work. It's not the president's fault. There's a major donor involved, there's social media involved, whatever, but tenure allows them to go back to the faculty. You avoid all the nasty headlines, and they can, their reputation is intact, and if they choose, they can continue to pursue other roles. And so I just think this tenure, by giving tenure, we can attract and keep good people. And right now, within our university system, I think we have 3 presidents that when we recruited them and hired them, they had tenure, so we honored that. But we also have numerous presidents in our system that have been with us for a long time that do not have tenure. In this day and age of tight budgets, of intense competition for talented leaders, I just think tenure is something that there isn't much of a cost. that can show appreciation for our university, our campus leaders. And so I just wanted to start the dialogue with the governance committee and then visit with Chair Hacker, and we decided to continue the dialogue here. And then I want you to, I'll send you some more information, and then perhaps at our June board meeting, we can have a discussion and maybe move forward or not. And with that, the thing that is going on, a lot of universities are doing a lot of things, and here's some data. 33% of the higher ed institutions in our country offer a performance bonus, and it's usually the average amount is $80,000. 13% of our universities in the country offer retention contract completion bonuses, and the average amount is $97,000. 9% of the universities around the country give a signing bonus, $91,000. Deferred compensation. Over 50% of the universities have deferred compensation. The annual cost is $106,000. Now we have a plan that provides presidents after their 5th year, which provides a few $1,000s. Car allowances are quite standard. Additional insurance, relocation expenses, which we do. So there's a competitive market for high quality leadership, and we got to have all the tools in our toolbox to be able to compete. And with that, I'd gladly answer any questions you might have. But
thank you, Member Morton.
It can't be confused as faculty tenure. Faculty tenure is completely different. And presidential tenure is controlled by the governing board. Go ahead, Tim.
Chair Hacker, question for you, Member Morton, Tim Mahalik here. I guess I'm just, so the information that you plan to forward on to us will give us some outlines and some guidance. I did do some research on my own, and it sounds like our numbers and my numbers and what you've researched seem to be similar. But as I listen to you speak, are you thinking about structuring this in the contract when we hire somebody, and to take a look at existing contracts to rework those? Is that what we're seeing?
Well, I think this could be a topic as we go through contract discussions with our current campus leaders. But then if we establish a policy so that when we do have an opening and we're recruiting, that, hey, the North Dakota University system does provide tenure, that can be part of our toolbox.
Okay. All right, that's helpful. Thank you.
And hopefully we're going to recruit high quality and hire high quality people that deserve tenure. And they have a terminal degree. We will always insist on the terminal degree.
Chair Hacker, this is Member Louders. Point of information for the board. Again, I do sit on the governance committee, and I would ask, as we research this topic, that the board take its time, take a very comprehensive look at this issue. I believe the president's role is distinctive. It is not that of a professor, and it requires a unique skill set that doesn't necessarily align with that of a faculty member. I think a president is charged to focus on presidential duties, and they are distinct and unique. In terms of tenure, I believe tenure should be based on academic background and experience. It is not, in my opinion, a perk of the position or an incentive. It's the recognition of a distinguished record of teaching and research. When I think about the most recent hires, Mayville, Valley City, UND, Dickinson, Bismarck State as of late, Those searches have demonstrated that we have excellent candidates out there seeking employment within the university system without that incentive in place. So I do, I do value the fact that we need to be competitive. We need to offer a comprehensive package that ensures going forward that we do have top candidates seeking employment here. However, I would like to encourage the governance committee to continue exploring other incentive options. Just something to think about. I think this particular issue has an impact not only on our leadership, but on our faculty as well. So just want to be sure that this governing board takes a very broad and comprehensive look at this issue.
Thank you, Member Loiters.
This is Dr. Dragset.
Sure, go ahead, Dr. Dragset.
Thank you, Chair. I think that Ms. Louders brings up some really important points that the faculty feel very strongly about. I just want to make sure that everyone received the March 17th letter from the Council of College Faculties. I think that you know our opinion on that. The only thing that I would add to what's already been said by Member Louders and the letter that was sent to you is that I know that Member Morton says that there is no cost. That would be the only thing I would add, that there is a cost, I believe, to faculty morale and people who have worked their way toward tenure. Tenure is the word that has a lot of meaning and carries a lot of weight. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dragset. Any other board
Chair
members?
Hacker, this is
Feedback?
Casey. Chair Hacker, Casey. With governance being shifted over to the Research and Governance Committee now, I appreciate the discussion and especially what Member Louders has stated, and we will certainly take our time looking at it. And I think part of what will need to happen with this discussion is to talk to the recent presidential hires that have been given tenure to know what impact that may or may not have had with their application to be a president within the North Dakota University system. So we'll hopefully do a very good job, take our time, and we recognize the issues out there.
Thank you, Casey. Chancellor, you were a part of each of the last 4 searches. My understanding is we awarded North Dakota University system tenure to those last 4 candidates. And can you just talk about how important it was to those candidates?
Yes, Chair Hacker. And one before I get into that, I just wanted to say, for those who are listening, this did not originate as a cabinet initiative. Don Morton is being very thoughtful about HR and recruiting. So I know there's lots of pressures on salaries and furloughs, but this was not a cabinet initiated by the presidents themselves. So in case there's any confusion. But no, tenure is important. And I think it was crucial in recruiting a couple of recent presidents. Dr. Armacost is a nationally recognized scholar, worked his way up as a faculty member, each step, department chair, dean, provost. Dr. Lefebvre, similarly. Dr. Van Horn, similarly. Mitzel. And as well as Steve Easton, technically not a doctor, but he was an attorney with the terminal degree. So those are very, very important, especially for those who have worked their way up. And I can tell you that in each of those institutions, they can easily fall back to the faculty. Even Mr. Easton is a tenured professor from Wyoming Law School. They're looking at building out a criminal justice program. So I can definitely see the value of tenure when you have the academic credentials to go back and teach that. But look forward to the board's discussion if they want to spend time on that.
So, Chancellor, are you saying that a president wouldn't be a good teacher if he hadn't gone through the faculty tenure process?
Chair Morton, I'm just saying that having been a faculty member myself, and I had considered a tenured track version when I was at my previous college, that there's 1,000 years of tradition in teaching, which goes back to the Middle Ages, and the teaching profession has high standards, just like the medical profession, others. And as you pointed out, there's lots of non-traditional presidents who've been chief financial officers, they've been political leaders, but they've never proven themselves in a classroom. And so you'd have to, look very closely at their ability to teach, whereas faculty who've gone through all of that have had years and years of calling, mentoring, and developing. But there is a difference, and so I just want to acknowledge that difference of professional background.
This came up at our committee meeting too, and my response was, as a university president, they've got a terminal degree. Wherever they got that terminal degree, and they have a vested interest in that topic. They're bright people. Chances are they're lifelong learners, and a lot of times they bring a great new perspective. I completely disagree with the idea that the president can't go back and be a faculty member.
Well, if I may, I don't want to go too long in this because obviously the board wants to look at this. Well, you don't need tenure to teach. I'm looking out the window at Mary, and they had a medical doctor, I believe his name was Warford, he came back and he taught, and he never asked to have tenure. He wanted to just teach because of the love of teaching. And so presidents can certainly come back. They could be distinguished professors, but it's just the tenure comes with generally a lifetime commitment, which was raised by one president in the discussion of the governance committee, that there's ways the presidents could go to a contract, and it was raised by one of the presidents, but you could be terminated in a couple of years. Well, if you're a good teacher, you're performing well, then I would think the campus would want to keep you. So I'm just making the point that tenure has traditionally been awarded to those in the faculty profession, and that there's ways to have presidents come back teaching without having that lifetime guarantee of employment.
They have a lifetime guarantee, they have a guaranteed employment, but not necessarily in the presidential role.
Right. I'm just saying that, and again, I don't want to get into too much here, but part of the reason for tenure was to protect academic freedom. This is partly why the board even was established, because Governor Langer wanted to eliminate 6 faculty members. And so there's a special category for those who've been in scholarly pursuits to protect them. As Dr. Dragson pointed out, there isn't an insignificant cost to having, a lifetime employment guarantee, to 10 presidents, and then they move on, and then we have 10 more presidents. So I think you need to look very closely at the potential financial burden down the line over years of accumulating, all presidential tenure positions.
So you're assuming we're going to fire all 10? Is that the assumption you're making? That we're going to fire all 10? And
No, I'm just saying you potentially have a commitment, an employment commitment that could be exercised for decades. I'm just saying we should be clear-eyed on what that means when we do that.
Well, my argument is,
but I'm glad to engage in
people that have a lot of different options when we're recruiting them.
Yes, sir, and I would say they are a high-performing group.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Morton. I do know that, just in my experience here, half of our presidents are now tenured. Of course, they were awarded tenure when they came and applied. It was highly valuable to them to be able to gain tenure. But during that time, I know firsthand 3 non-tenured presidents right now to this day that are spending time in the classroom. One of them is retiring in a couple of days. And there is deep passion for academia, for teaching by our presidents. And one of our presidents was tenure tracked, and within months of receiving tenure, and was tapped for a leadership position at his institution where he was employed at that time. And now, because of our rules, there is no possible way for him to ever gain tenure. And so I think this is a worthy topic of discussion. I think there are probably ways that we could find a path forward with appropriate requirements, such as...
Thank you, Chair Hacker. And additionally, thank you for adding Danita Bai to our committee, so Casey and I don't have to carry the burden all alone. And welcome, Danita, for being part of that committee. Budget and Finance Committee met 19th of May. A number of the items were part of our consent agenda that we addressed. And we had a couple of committee discussions. Probably most importantly, we've got the window open. Hopefully you're probably hearing the plane go by. So, all right. Most importantly, the discussion is really centered around to be presented to the governor, and based on his guidelines, there's been a lot of discussion around that. My expectations are that our committee will meet again, probably one more meeting prior to next month's meeting. We'll review, just an additive to there, and that was really the extent of our meeting.
Thank you, Member Mahalik. And in between you and Tammy, can you talk about timeline for the board to adopt the proposed budget that will come through the Budget and Finance Committee?
Yeah, Tammy, if you would like to jump in on
those resources. I believe the state was awarded a grand total of about $1.2 billion at one point. And are we a part of that discussion?
Chair Hacker, yes, we are. You're right. The state was awarded $1.25 billion in CARES Act funds. In this month, earlier this month, the budget section approved, I believe it was about $500 million of that to various needs across the state. So with the $700 or so million that's left, we will be submitting an application for those funds. I don't have the total dollar amount yet. Was just receiving some of the final calculations and information from the campuses this morning. So we'll be putting that together and submitting a request. And what would be in that request is really the expenses first that we had to incur in order to make the changes we did back in March and April. And there was cost to that, as well as those costs that institutions need to incur in order to safely restart again this fall face-to-face. And so we're compiling all of that, and we will be submitting the request for their consideration.
Chancellor?
And one other tool the governor has at disposal, and Vice Chancellor Johnson's heading this up, is they do have a small pool. The acronym is GEAR, I think Governor's Emergency Education Reserve, something about $6 million. A good chunk of that will probably go to higher K-12. We may get some, and we are pulling together inputs from the campuses right now. The governor is leaning toward just innovative things rather than just each campus gets a small share of this. So there is one other very small pot we're working on today on.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Tammy, Chancellor, or Member Mahalik?
And across the campuses and in CTS performed admirable. But he can give you some of the terabyte numbers, but we're talking, huge increases in just the flow of data. And it just shows an example, again, with the submission that Chair Hacker was just talking about, and Vice Chancellor Dolan and Mahalik on the OMB requesting more money to reconfigure classes, computers, bandwidth. I was on a call again with some research universities, and one campus alone is going to spend $15 million. It's a big university on just the IT classroom configurations to support these new world we're in. So with that, Darren, are you on there? You want to talk about your annual report? Anything else you want to mention about COVID? Feel free.
Sure. Thank you, Chancellor. Chair Hacker, members of the board, item number 26 is the annual report that we are required to provide to the board in accordance with Century Code 15-10-44.1.c. As you'll see, it's quite an extensive document that we put together. It is a few months late for obvious reasons, but it was underway, and we did finish this for your review. like I said, extensive report represents hundreds of thousands of hours during the calendar year from folks from CTS, really good work done by them, and also a lot of effort by campus folks. This is a partnership with our campuses, and very little of this would have been able to be accomplished without very close and collaborative relationships at the campus level. A couple of things I'll just point out related to the Chancellor's intro with the COVID situation. During the last calendar year, we did complete the Blackboard project, and really that paid us dividends. We were really pleased to see how seamlessly the technical systems handled the move of 11,000 classes into that hosted Blackboard system. It really does show the power of a cloud-based system to be able to quickly scale compared to what we were previously doing, which were on-prem systems. We would have had quite a bit of trouble reacting the way that Blackboard reacted in that instance. Just a little geek metric for you. Prior to COVID, we were running at about 15 terabytes of data in our Blackboard system. That was our contracted amount. We just were updated that we're at 30 terabytes of data simply because of that migration over. Again, those are costs that right now were absorbed within our contract. Obviously, as we renegotiate with Blackboard, there will be a cost for that, but that is to be expected. But the fact that it could be done quickly and be reactive to this emerging situation is certainly a good thing for us. A couple other things I'll point out, again, maybe a little bit of a COVID-related issue, is we did complete the final major upgrades to ensure that all of our PeopleSoft pillars, financial, HR, and campus solutions, which is the student information package, are into the current version, are much more mobile capable. Certainly, again, in this environment, having that multi-device capability, I think, has certainly helped a lot. With that, though, I won't call out anything else. Like I said, it's an extensive report. I certainly would entertain any questions on anything else that is of interest from you in this report.
Thank you, Darren. Board members, any questions for Darren on the annual report? Seeing none, thank you, Darren. Appreciate the work. It's really quite a monumental task to flip 11,000 courses over to completely online, and clearly a lot of data was used up. Do you want to move into item 27?
Sure. Chair Hacker, members of the board, before you in 27 is our, again, Century Code required reporting of our large projects. Large project oversight is defined in Century Code. We currently have two projects that meet that definition. The Novolution project for NDSU and UND is an electronic grants administration project. Successfully went live with phase 2 during this quarter. That was great news. That required an awful lot of work from the campuses and their research staffs to get through the user acceptance training and go live with that piece of it. And we are in the next phase. This is a multi-phase, very complicated, long-range project, and that is still green from a project perspective. The second one is our Odin library management system, the academic side of the house. Just for your information, Odin is the organization that has provided library technology services, not only to higher ed, but to state government entities, to K-12s, to public libraries, very broad reach. They undertook a very big challenge about a year and a half ago by taking the previous system that we had and going out for RFP, and they came back with two solutions because it was the best way to approach it. One was the academic library management system that is being deployed as we speak, and the separate project will be the system that will manage the K-12 and public libraries. They just have slightly different needs. So it was best in this case to break those two out into different solutions, yet still provide integration between those two. So the Odin team has done a great job getting us from a system that had been around for 10 or 15 years into a more modern and new system. So that's the large project oversight report. I would stand for any questions you may have on those.
Thank you, Darren. Much appreciated. Any questions for Darren on the quarterly large project report? Hearing none, we'll move into item 28, Eric Olson, Title IX update.
Thank you, Chair Hacker and members of the board. This will be a relatively quick update compared to what was given to the Academic and Student Affairs Committee last week. But this is a very important update that will have major implications for the system. As I'm sure many of you are aware from news reports, the final version of the Title IX regulations, which I previewed back in December of 2018, were released on May 6th of 2020. These regulations will be effective August 14th of 2020. The regulation is only 25 or so pages long. There are over 2,000 pages of interpretive comments and responses to the over 125,000 comments that were submitted as part of the rulemaking process. So because I outlined the vast majority of these changes back at the December 2018 SBHE meeting, I won't spend a long time reviewing the specific changes that are being set out here. I did that at ASAC, and there will be more discussion of that coming probably next month as well. Many of these changes that have been made since in the final regulation versus the notice of proposed rulemaking have actually been helpful to give institutions some additional flexibility, but those changes have come at the cost of the removal of all of the safe harbor provisions which were previously included in the regulations. So there are some major concerns present in these. Once I have a full summary of the changes, which will hopefully be soon, this has just been a major undertaking to try to go through that much information, along with all the information being provided by the trade associations and so forth that are analyzing this. I will provide that information to the SBHE by email, as was requested by Member DeShock at the ASAC meeting last week. A couple just very high-level things to note. These changes will require a number of changes to the student grievance and hearing process as related to Title IX, which the Department of Education has indicated will result in increased due process for both complainants and respondents. However, it will make those proceedings very reminiscent of civil lawsuits and trials, which means that there are lots of concerns in terms of training and how those will be conducted within the student judicial process. It will also require significant revisions to Title IX policies and procedures, potentially along with related sexual harassment and misconduct policies and procedures at both the system and institution level. It will require investment at the system and campus level of both financial and human capital in terms of making new hires and conducting some extensive training on existing employees. And then this also will likely create some need for state legislative action on some issues such as open records, which currently makes certain Title IX records exempt, but that provision will be in conflict with these new regulations. Then there's, in terms of prognosis and sort of where this is going, there has been at least one lawsuit filed against the new regulations so far. It's filed by the ACLU on behalf of a number of advocacy groups that have advocated for sexual assault survivors on campus, and more are expected. It was only published in the Federal Register last week, even though it came out on May 6th. So over the next few weeks, as people continue to dig into these, I'd expect that there will be more lawsuits. At this point, the prognosis of that lawsuit and therefore the effective date of the regulations is unclear, and I really would hesitate to hazard a guess as to whether April 14th will still be the implementation date. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been closely working with the attorneys for all the institutions to put together some policy changes and guidelines which will involve probably most likely an entirely new Title IX policy at the board level, plus a number of changes to existing policies to correspond with that new policy. These policies will likely be focused on students, faculty, employees, and HR as well. We expect that these changes will move toward the SBHE next month through the normal policy approval process, but may require a special meeting to fully implement those, though we'll try to avoid that as much as we can, of course. And I just want to make sure that I said the right date is August 14th is the implementation date. There's also, and I wanted to convey that there's been a sense from discussions that myself and other attorneys have had with campuses that it will be necessary to set up a system of shared personnel and services to respond to these changes, particularly at smaller institutions. If this is something campuses want to pursue, it will require a certain level of uniformity of policies and procedures between campuses, which will mean that we'll need to work together to sort of set up these new policies and procedures prior to August 14th. And then, again, I just want to, as sort of a closing comment on this, full implementation by August 14th of 2020 will require a significant lift by the campuses, the system office, and the State Board of Higher Ed. But the Title IX Task Force will be meeting, and we expect that there will be a lot of work going on with that body, as well as with the attorneys to address these changes. And myself and the other legal counsel will continue to work closely with the system and institutions to meet this new challenge. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that that the board members or anyone on the line has right now. Otherwise, I will be back next month with more.
Thank you, Eric. Board members, any questions for Eric? I do have one question. I understand the federal rulemaking process just a little bit. Have they issued FAQs yet? That's usually where you get the real guidance of how to conform.
So they have issued some FAQs, but not sort of on a lot of the issues that people are really having the most trouble with trying to interpret. And that's the bulk of the over 2,000 pages I mentioned are sort of responses to the comments, which are sort of guidance but not binding. So we're expecting more of those to come out in coming days, and that frankly may be where some of these lawsuits are waiting, that we expect to be filed, are waiting for, to see how the Department of Education will be interpreting these new regulations, so that so that the potential plaintiffs can say how it will affect them specifically.
Thank you, Eric. Lots of work on that front, of course. With that, we will move into other reports. Member DeShock, Student Association.
Yes, my report will be very short today. The North Dakota Student Association is transitioning administrations, working from afar this summer. So things are quiet on that front, but I believe in the next month or 2 months we'll have some more substantial reports and be releasing our priorities. And when students are back on campus and we hold our first meeting, we'll be drafting the organization's legislative priorities for the next year. So exciting things to come in the future.
Thank you, Caleb. And I know there's you guys probably missed out on your annual retreat this summer where you tackle a lot of those things. So thanks for staying focused and moving your priorities forward. Council of College Faculties, Dr. Dragseth.
Yes, thank you. The Council of College Faculties has elected its new officers for the 2021 academic year. Ken Helvang will continue on as CCF president, kind of like you, Chair. He's willing to take on another year, which is great. Cheryl Nilsson from Minot is going to be the vice president and the faculty representative on AAC. Jeff Hart will continue as treasurer parliamentarian and the faculty representative on SAC. Deanna Solom from BSC will be the secretary, and their new office terms start June 1st. You may know, and I think that several of you do, that I was reelected in February to continue on as the faculty advisor to the State Board of Higher Ed. However, I was recently selected as Dickinson State University's new provost. So a new faculty advisor. I'm excited about that. I'm going to miss all of you for sure. But a new faculty advisor will be elected at our June 2nd meeting, so just a couple of days from now. And that person's term will start July 1st. So both of us will probably be at the June meeting for that. We also want to thank the State Board of Higher Ed and the North Dakota University System for welcoming the council to represent system faculty on the various committees and in the various meetings. We have nominated and have let the NDUS Smart Start Task Force know who the 3 people are that we would like to represent research universities, 4-year universities, and 2-year universities. Now I believe that nomenclature has been changed to large, medium, and small. So that's a little bit different, but thank you for allowing that to happen. So that's very important. And I think that in a final note, our chairperson of the CCF said in addition to providing a quality education, providing for safety of students, faculty, and staff, those are the things that are paramount to the Council of College Faculties. So we do appreciate, as I mentioned prior, items 3 and 4 on the Smart Restart Task Force. So thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Dragstaff, and congratulations becoming the provost of Dickinson State University, and we'll look forward to working with you in that new capacity. Ms. Mattern.
Thank you. I was able to send out the State Staff Senate updates this morning. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look at them, or if not, you can peruse through those. Many of the campuses are selecting their own Staff Senate leadership and looking at postponing or rescheduling prior planned face-to-face events and retreats and such. We will be electing new leadership for the State Staff Senate at our June meeting. We had originally hoped to have that as a face-to-face meeting, obviously due to the circumstances. We are not able to do that, so we will hold the business portion of our meeting, which is electing our new leadership, still during our June meeting, and then hope to have a face-to-face possibly this fall, depending on circumstances, as with everything else. A lot of our discussion, of course, centered around the COVID-19 response and concerns and inputs from staff as we go forward and navigate through all of this. And the other item that we are working on is updating a website for State Staff Senate as a resource for others to learn about us or to find contact information for that. So, and again, just a big thank you to all the staff who are working in numerous fashions as we navigate through all this, from those who are required to still come to campuses and work on campus, as well as those who switch to a entirely virtual environment. Just the amount of work and time and effort that's gone into that has continued to be amazing and appreciated by all of us. So thank you to all the staff who are working hard on that. And with that, that's my report.
Thank you, Ms. Mattern. Greatly appreciated. I'm sure there's a lot of your folks ready to get back to work. Today was the first day that Retha stepped foot back on the BSC campus since going home, and I'm sure it feels good, this meeting. I want to, Member Mahalik, did you want to give a little bit of an additional update on CTE?
I did. Thank you, Chair Hacker. I just wanted to give you an update and to the State Board and other members, guests. We are making, I think, great progress here in the city, moving forward towards creation of a CTE through a collaboration with Minot State University, Dakota College of Botany, Trinity Hospital, and the city of Minot. A lot of good conversation back and forth, and really what's good about it is funding is available through the National Disaster Resiliency Grant that was awarded to the city of Minot, which will really allow us to pay for, the city to pay for complete retrofit and rehab of the building, can pay for desks, computers, and so on and so forth, and we can provide the programming. I know that Trinity has given the city of Minot the okay to go ahead and begin environmental work on the property. And it kind of touches on something that the Chancellor said earlier, that we've got students that are at the front lines, and it's an economic driver from that perspective to get these students downtown, to make them part of the future of the city, and it's just an exciting time, and it allows to train nurses, medical transcriptionists, and some other things. Along with that, we've had Minot Public Schools involved and offering use of their facilities to help develop programs. So a lot of good things. There's been a lot of challenges through this, in the city with the flood, and as of course we're all affected by COVID. But this is kind of a win, I think, for all of us as we look to move forward. And so it's exciting. Dr. Shirley or Dr. Migler would want to add to that, please do. But it's kind of fun to finally get to report some good news. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Mahalik. Much appreciated update. I know there's exciting things happening with the State College of Science that hopefully we'll get an update in the fall. And I think President Darling is working to expand wind technician program, certificate program out into the oil patch, and alongside with some support from Member Nesset. And so just a lot of really good things as we look to transition our society into jobs that are available and needed from jobs that maybe are a little more volatile. So thank you all for wonderful work on behalf of the whole state. That's not just me. It's just really amazing.
Chair Hacker.
Chancellor.
A couple presidents texted me to remind me to mention two things, which I was trying to be brief. On your exact theme of responsiveness, we've also had a meeting with coal industry executives, leading by Lisa Johnson, on helping the displacement that we sadly may see coming. There's still some hope some of these big power plant coal mines will remain open, but they want to take care of their people, and we are their provider of choice, so we're working on that. And then also one of the key things, and Vice Chancellor Dolan is working the governor's budget, legislative relations, the OMB money, the GERF money, but one of the key things in there is a potential proposal for a needs-based or maybe just a grant to help families who are struggling so they know they can send their kids to school. So we are trying to be responsive to the people of North Dakota, employers that are displacing their workers. And so I got those two out there. Those are the key things we're working on.
Thank you, Chancellor. That brings us to item number 32, public comment. I believe Nick Archuleta from North Dakota United was going to join us. I do want to make sure we have some time for him.
Yes, Chairman Hacker, can you hear me all right?
Yes. We can hear you great.
Well, good morning. Well, great. Say good morning and to you and to the members of the board, and I appreciate this opportunity to address all of you today. I want to begin today by expressing gratitude to this board for two very important and recent communications. The first is the news about launching the Smart Restart Task Force, and the second for the State Board of Higher Education Resolution 2020-03. Our members in the higher education community have been waiting for an opportunity to participate fully in the development of plans that will ensure safe reopenings on each of our higher education campuses. It is our hope that the Smart Restart Task Force, driven by the intent of the Board Resolution 2020-03, will prove to be an effective vehicle to ensure the inclusion of faculty and staff voices in the decision-making process. The third bullet of the resolution states that the State Board of Higher Education encourages institution presidents and the Chancellor to continue to involve faculty, staff, and student representatives where practicable in campus-level committees, task forces, and/or discussions regarding the transition back to on-campus, in-person classes and activities. We believe that each institution of higher education will be better served if the inclusion of campus community voices was an expectation of the State Board of Higher Education and not merely an action to be encouraged. Our members hope that the campus presidents, the Chancellor, and the working group chairs lean on the elected faculty and staff governance on each campus to play a vital role in the development of reopening protocols. It's true that the goal of the working groups is not to develop policy, but they will be establishing protocol. And in this case, I would argue that there is a very fine line between policy and protocol. Therefore, there is a lane for advocacy. Chairman Hacker and members of the board, our members have asked me to implore you to direct the Smart Restart Task Force to be as communicative and transparent as possible with the public and campus communities. Now is the time to over-communicate with campus and community stakeholders. We should never assume that everyone is receiving the same message at the same time. When communication is inconsistent or incomplete, people are left to draw conclusions that may or may not be true, and that sets back the efforts to reopen safely. Therefore, please be sure to communicate clearly and often with the public and our campus communities. In a conversation a week or so ago with Chancellor Hagerett, he committed to a meeting with our higher education faculty and staff leaders, and we very much look forward to that meeting, and we appreciate his willingness to come and meet with them. Finally, Chairman Hacker and members of the board, I agree that we cannot eliminate all risks posed by the novel coronavirus pandemic. But if some risk must be assumed by faculty, students, and staff, let that risk be mitigated to the greatest extent possible. To do so, the Smart Restart Task Force must learn of the concerns of our campus communities and work diligently and collaboratively with staff, students, and faculty to create the safe work and learning spaces they richly deserve. So I wanted to put that in the room, and I thank you for your time and your commitment to higher education in North Dakota. As an aside, we are totally on board with what Chancellor Hagerett said earlier about how now not being the time to invest less in higher ed, and we will stand ready to help you advocate that position in the legislature. So thank you once again.
Nick, thank you for your comments, and I wish we were able to be in person and we could have had you here one-on-one with the entire board. You're a great partner of higher education. Last session, we worked hand in hand to ensure that we got some reinvestment into salaries and compensation for our people, and so it's always a pleasure to work with you, and your comments are appreciated, and I could see that President or Dr. Wynn was laser focused in as he leads the task force to probably, to help ensure that communication and engagement are key as they move forward. Of course, these task forces were just created. We just made a decision at the last board meeting, and so things are moving quickly. We'll do our best to engage positively and to communicate frequently.
Well, we sure appreciate that, Chairman Hacker. Thank you again.
Thanks, Nick. Any other public comment?
Chairman Hacker,
So as
this
we
is
wrap
Ken
up-
Hellerving.
Sure, go ahead, Ken.
I just want to echo what Deb shared already, that we appreciate the university system and the State Board of Higher Education having us be part of the discussions that are taking place. We're going to continue to meet monthly during the summer, and we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Ken, and congratulations on your reappointment again to another term.
Thank you.
Ken, a question.
Sure. Go ahead, Chancellor.
And Dr. Helleving, Chancellor Hagerott, did you want to explain briefly the process you'll be taking to identify the faculty representatives, since Provost Dragzeth had to shift jobs, so to speak? Just, I know you explained that to me, but maybe just so they understand.
Sure. As Deb mentioned, we're meeting on June 2nd. We've been in the process of identifying potential nominees, and we do have some nominations that have been received. We will be holding the election at the June meeting, and that person then will start their term of office, as Deb indicated, by attending the June meeting along with Deb and assuming her role or his role on July 1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or feedback for the good of the order? Otherwise, I have a couple of housekeeping items at the end here. So just open up to board members.
Chair Hacker, this is Casey.
Go ahead, Casey.
With everything so unusual, and I know that traditionally there has not been a board meeting in July or August, but I would request that maybe some tentative dates be selected so that board members can prepare their schedules, and the meetings can be decided by you as chair and the chancellor as to whether or not they need to take place. But it would be nice to be able to fit a July and August meeting into our schedules with everything that's going on. Thank you.
Member Ryan, we traditionally do not have a meeting in August either. Why don't we, we'll drop 2 on the schedule. With the pandemic, I think it's timely, but also with there's a lot of uncertainty within the budget process and what that might look like. The governor came out with a budget recommendation for agencies, including higher education, but did not have Moody's report to base that on. So it's really, it's a challenging time to navigate the budget side of things. So I think that would be wise. Thanks for the recommendation. We'll put something on the schedule. Those will likely be Ivan meetings as well for end of July and end of August. Thank you, Casey. Speaking of our meetings, next meeting, we are planning to have our June meeting in person. The June meeting is always a big meeting because it's when we have members coming off of the board, members coming on the board. We will have another new appointee by that time to join Ms. Bai, and welcome to her again. Erica will step into her full role at the tail end of that meeting, and Kayla will be outgoing. So the plan at the moment, and obviously things can change, but we are going to welcome the full board if you're comfortable in attending in person. We are right now at this moment in the Bavendick room at BSC. I believe this is where we will attempt to have that meeting, and Christy's giving me the nod. Yes, this is where that meeting will be held. And the wonderful thing about the Bavendick stateroom is it's very large. We can get very spread out. It has a good camera system to be able to move around into the room. And we will Ivan in all of those that are maybe not as necessary to be in person. And so this would be some of the system staff will stay at the Capitol. Presidents and institutions, you're clearly allowed to just Ivan in, but we are going to attempt to have the board come in person, as well as have President Scogan hopefully join us as well. That will be his last meeting, and we are going to wish him well at that meeting too. So any feedback or concerns about doing our best to have an in-person meeting in partial, let's call it a partial in-person meeting in June. Hearing none, we'll stick with that plan.
Maybe Dr. Wynn might join us too at that day.
Yeah, if Dr. Wynn is able to come, but I'll defer. I really don't want to pull people out of the crowd and say we want you here because they might not feel comfortable being here. So it will be at will, and it's at will for the board members as well. This is not mandatory to be in person, but we are going to space out and do our best to have as much in person as we can. Okay. With that, that's our future board meeting. Last item on the agenda, June 30th, and look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you. Have a great week.
Nick. You bet. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Nicely done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.